What up, guys? Jetshells here, and welcome back to World of Tanks, and welcome to the first video in the series of the Prokhorovka scouting guide. I've been putting off doing this series for a long time simply because I'm lazy. There is no other good reason for it. But this map is going to just take a lot of work to go over because there's just so many different areas of the map that you can use for counter spotting angles and vision lanes and engagement areas where crossfires can happen and direct fire can happen between tanks. So it's gonna be a decent length series. I'm not sure on how many videos it's going to require, but whatever it is, I am more than happy to do it now. I'm really excited actually to start this series because in the process of putting this first video together, in fact, even I've learned better about how to scout the map myself. So I'm really looking forward to starting this out, and I hope you guys are too. Today we're going to be looking at the 1-2 lines from the north spawn, and this area of the map is infamous for people getting spotted and blown away before they can see enemy tanks, and they don't know why, and people get frustrated and they say camo rating is broken or view range and spotting mechanics are broken. Trust me, the spotting mechanics in World of Tanks are not optimal. I absolutely agree with that. But once I start going over these positions, you guys will see how certain areas of the 1-2 lines are getting spotted from the south side, the south spawn tanks, that is. And even if you guys aren't scout players, you will be able to better tell what positions that you can take to defend yourself from enemy tank vision, or to counter enemy scouts that are trying to move into these positions to help yourself and your team. Before we get started, I want to let you know that I'm going to be jumping back and forth in between different battles and games that I had in different scout tanks and in different positions, just so I can better show you guys the exact positions that I'm talking about and how they are effective and what they can spot and what they can't spot. So just a heads up there. Now, first of all, it's really important actually when you're decided that you want to scout the 1-2 lines on Prokhorovka from the north spawn. You've looked at the layout and you think that there's a decent number of the tanks on your team that are going to be spotting the middle line ridge, and you feel like your vision and your camo rating are more effective. Just going to pause the game here. When you feel like your vision and your camo rating are going to be more effective over here on the 1-2 lines, it's very important that you don't lollygag and take a really indirect route from the north spawn. It's really important that you take the most direct route from your spawn to this location. And sometimes I have a really easterly spawn from the north cap circle, in which cases sometimes I don't even try to get into early aggressive passive spotting positions over here on the 1-2 line, simply because I'm pretty sure that enemy scouts will beat me and be able to spot me before I get into these positions safely. In which case, I normally end up roll scouting the ridgeline or going over to the east side of the map. But the best angle that I've found for an angle of approach into these bushes up here that I'm going to be showing you guys is basically directly making a diagonal path across the C2 square. And once you've crossed over the road here, you can widen your angle a little bit like this, just in case if enemy tanks have gotten into bushes down here. But you'll notice if you look at the mini-map down to the bottom right-hand corner of the screen here, you'll see that the south spawn is actually slightly offset to the east compared to the north spawn, which means that it's slightly further away from the 1-2 lines than the north spawn is. So the north spawn actually has an advantage in getting into these early spotting positions in D1 and E1, which is an advantage that you need to take if you want to get really good early vision control here. Alright, first of all, this is the first and the most conservative of the passive spotting positions. This is at the border between D1 and E1. Most people know about this bush up here in E1, and we'll be taking a look at that in a little bit. This bush I use when I think that, there's a lot of mobility on the enemy team, and I'm afraid that I will get spotted, mainly from the middle. When you're crossing out of the north spawn and you're coming up here, you'll notice that there's a bank here on the 1 line that elevates quite a decent amount from the 2 line. So you're actually quite a bit exposed as you're driving from all the way up here to the E1 bush, and you're not in cover until you actually reach this position. So it's actually very easy. Let's see if I can go into free cam here. It's actually very easy for scouts to spot you from this location right here. Scouts that have roll scouting the middle ridge line here and that are lining the eastern side of the road here, and they've come up into a passive position along the road. It's very easy for them to spot you because there's this large gap in between this bush that I'm sitting in right now and this bush, and it's a decent amount of open ground to cover before you're have the camera rating of this bush again. So you have to decide if it's worth the risk, and judging from the mobility and the composition of the enemy team, if you want to try and use this conservative bush here or this bush right here. And we see here that there's an enemy scout YOLOing towards me here, and this is the benefit that the D1 bush gives you. You're not as high and exposed, and you see there I got lit there as I was firing, but I'm much lower and I can get into cover much more quickly. And as I'm not that far of a distance away from the 2-line ridge on the east side of the road here. So I was able to escape, get back into cover, and allow my team to assist me in killing that scout without too much risk to myself. So now I'm going to go back into the D1 bush again, especially now. I'm going to pause the game again. It's very, very bad idea to try and go into this E1 bush if there's enemy tanks here on the 3 line. Do not try it. You're only about 200 to 250 meters away from these tanks, and they will easily spot you. There's no soft cover in between this bush and this bush, like I said before, and you will get spotted, especially after this late in the game, right? I know it's only a minute and a half into the game, but that is a significant amount of time that's passed. The enemy team is already deployed, and they're in positions to spot you. So you don't want to push your luck. I generally use this bush if there's enemy tanks where this Lorraine and the T-54 are. And as you can see there, this D1 bush is actually pretty effective, as there's a line of trees in between myself and those mediums that I was talking about, which is also a significant benefit to this situation. You can spot tanks on F0 area. I'm going to pause the game here again. You can spot enemy tanks that are right here. Basically, a lot of the time tanks like to creep up, they get impatient and they like to creep up from this depression here where this T-54 is, and they try to bush hop and slowly creep along here. And they also like to go into this bowl right here. It's a little bit more difficult to spot them from the location that I'm at right here, but you can spot almost every tank, I would say, except tanks with higher, really good camo rating, trying to do this. And if they crest here and they're trying to bush hop, all the tanks behind you will shoot them up really easily, and they'll die for it. Is also another thing to keep in mind when looking at this D1 bush. So the most important thing when you're scouting the 1-2 line is being patient, right? A lot of people don't take the time to just wait for the enemy to get impatient, just like that CDC and this Jagdpanzer E100 here. what you can expect to see from this D1 bush is basically everything along the west side of the road here. Not easily. A lot of these tanks here are sitting in bushes, and you won't see them until they start moving or they fire their gun, in which case they're lowering their camo rating. And you can see everything up until basically where the road starts curving here at the top of the J2 grid square. And you can also counter spot enemy scouts that may have taken a really bad approach lane into this bush right here. A lot of scouts like to sit in this bush here in G1. So that's basically what the vision lane that you have from this D1 bush. And once you've succeeded in driving these enemy tanks back behind the curve in the road, right here, starting where the CDC wreck is, then you can start progressing from there, as long as there aren't tanks in this location here where this T-54 is. So here I am on a game in my VK1602 Leopard, and I have successfully made it into the E1 bush from out of the spawn. The E1 bush here is right on the edge of the map, and it's on this set of 4 bushes right here and these 2 trees. And once again, when you're trying to get to this E1 bush early, right at the start of the game, it's very important that you don't lollygag and take a really wide loop. You need to come directly this way as fast as you can, and then you can take a wide arc when you get to about where this T-37 is into your approach, so you don't get spotted from this area right here. But now that I've successfully made it into this E1 bush, I'm going to explain what kind of vision angles this particular position can spot. First of all, this position is really good for spotting this middle location here and this left depression, and this center depression right here, and tanks that are surfing across the middle ridge area. You can't really see anything beyond where this VK2801 and this E25 are. It's just simply out of your view range. So the main reason that you can spot the center ridge line a lot easier from the E1 position and not the D1 position is for 2 reasons. One, you're a lot higher up on this bank right here, so you're at a higher elevation level. But more importantly, there's actually this stand of trees right here that's actually a lot thicker on Prokhorovka. This particular game is on Fiery Salient, which is almost the same map for all intensive purposes. Just a few foliage and terrain elevation variances, but it's not too much different. So the main reason that you can spot the middle ridge line right here a lot easier, once again, like I was saying, is because this position has this stand of trees right here, and it has a stand of trees right here that's blocking the line of sight between these 2 positions effectively. So when you're up here on this E1 position, you don't have that camo obstruction, and you can spot this area here. And you can spot tanks that are peeking up here from the G2 and H2 position really easily if they're not using the bushes correctly, and they're trying to peek and poke, and they're trying to spot tanks here for an example, and you can spot them really easily, and hopefully you'll have really good snipers behind you, take them out very quickly. Also, of course, the other position that you can spot from E1 is the same area that you were spotting from D1, except this time you can spot it a lot further. The D1 bush can only spot tanks to about here, the very bottom of the H2 grid square, simply because this curvature in the road is a lot more pronounced in Prokhorovka variant and not Fiery Salient variant. But this is the main reason why you cannot spot anything further than this position, other than the camo rating from the bushes, is that the road actually curves this way. So you no longer have a direct line of sight, and the elevation of the road blocks your vision, basically. So this E1 bush is much more productive than the D1 bush for sure, just because of your elevation level, and you can spot tanks a little bit further back than you could with the D1 bush. I would say about another 50 meters or so you can spot enemy tanks from. But once again, the goal of this position is to try and force one your goal is to force enemy tanks that are peeking up over this ridge line to stop, because your really good vision is getting them shot by the snipers behind you. 2, you're trying to force the enemy to retreat back behind this curve in the road right here, once again from snipers behind you, and from support from the mid-ridge. The mid-ridge right here can also shoot this position right here. And potentially this E1 bush here, and I'm going to show you guys. This E1 bush, if you get into this position successfully early, is extremely powerful in counter scouting this G1 bush, which is the not the exact mirror, but the similar mirror that the enemy scouts can use to spot the road like you're doing. And if you have good enough camera rating and good enough view range, or they take a really bad line like this, and instead of coming up safely from behind this to keep the bush in between themselves and you can very easily spot them trying to get into this location. And since they're very high up on a slope right here, and they're in a lot of open ground, it takes them a really long time to cross back over here and get into cover, or back here, and usually they'll die really quickly from the sniper's fire behind you. And jumping to another game real quick here before we move on to the next line of progression, I wanted to talk about this particular position right here. This is also another option that you guys have when you're taking an early spotting position. If you feel like another scout on your team, for example, is going to make it into this position first, what you can do as well is take up in passive spotting location here in this cluster of bushes right here, and you can actually counter scout the enemy scout that's driving up the slope here and trying to get into the G1 bush right here. And it can be very useful in preventing him from getting set up here and giving vision for his team. Another very, very important job as a scout is not only scouting the enemy tanks and their deployment and their snipers, but also spotting enemy scouts. That's also a very, very important role for you as a scout. This is also a very good potential position for a medium. If you're in a medium and you see that a light tank on your team has already taken up position either in the D1 bush here or in the E1 bush here, but you also want to help in vision in some way, use this position right here to try and counter scout the enemy scouts as they're trying to move into position. Also, but keep in mind that this position here is very exposed to getting spotted from the center line ridge area. So I would not use this position here unless you're very confident that there are no enemy tanks at least in this 2-line depression and 3-line depression right here, and no one is peeking up right here. And definitely don't use this position here, definitely if there's any tanks here, obviously, because they're so close they'll proxy spot you. Alright, so moving on to the next set of progression bushes. Once you feel like the D1 and the E1 bushes are no longer being productive, is this bush and this set and row of bushes right here in F1. You can sit a little bit higher and use this bush here if you want next to this tree. I like using this clump right here because it's a little bit larger and it covers your tank better. But when you're moving from the E1 bush into the F1 bush, I would highly, highly recommend that you at first loop back this way and come in from the bush at a low angle, because it's pretty likely that there might be a tank sitting back up here high along the bank in H1 and in J1. And if you cut across from the E1 bush to the F1 bush directly, as you see here, there's quite a large gap in between these two positions, and it's quite easy for tanks here that are sitting up and camoed up in these bushes to spot you as you cross this gap right here. When you're using this F1 bush, you're a little bit closer to this position here, and you can cut through the enemy tank's camo rating a little bit better. Once the enemy tanks retreat back behind this bend of the road, the progression along the rest of the 1-2 lines becomes a lot easier. But mainly, actually the main focus of this F1 bush is not actually spotting the road necessarily, but it's actually to try and spot enemy snipers that are sitting here along the G1, H1, and J1 slope here. A lot of tanks, well, I shouldn't say a lot of tanks, but a decent amount of tanks, it's usually likely that you'll at least find one or two tanks sitting here, either trying to give vision for their team or to snipe into the middle of the map right here. So this is a pretty decent position to try and counter spot this area here. It's very, 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 very important for you guys to know that when you are moving from the E1 bush to the F1 bush, like I said before, to take a conservative approach. But if you get spotted from moving to this location, you need to be keeping in the back of your mind, there's a high probability that I will get spotted. And if you get spotted moving here, you have two avenues of escape. One, you can dive into this little bowl depression here in the E2, F2 area, keeping in mind to make sure that there are no enemy tanks here or here really close that would be able to put a lot of pressure on you and pin you down, and you wouldn't be able to escape without dying. Or your alternative route of escape is to actually loop straight back north and go along the road and back up into safety right here. But if you get into this F1 bush safely, basically you don't want to be advancing any more from this position unless you know for absolute certainty that there's no snipers up high on the bank here anymore. You need to make sure that they've been driven off or that there's no one here before you decide to progress any further than this location right here.